I'm curious to get your take on this. When it comes to specifically questions and concerns, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing right now on the commercial banking front that are keeping financial brand leaders up at night?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a couple things. I think what I'm seeing from, and it probably depends a little bit on the size of the bank, right? Because I think the at different sizes, I think the challenges are different. But broadly speaking, I think there's still this question of how do we get deposits in a cost-efficient manner, right? How do we think about operating the bank more profitably? I think as the banks have been put under a lot more margin pressure, they're trying to think about how they operate more efficiently. At the same time, though, it's not just about cutting costs. There is also a question around how do they actually still continue to grow, right? So this really, I think what I'm hearing is a question around efficient growth. And I think that's certainly a big theme that I'm hearing a lot about. I think another side that I'm hearing about as well in the commercial banking space is thoughtfulness about diversifying their deposit base. And I think that is coming up and more apparent the larger the bank gets. In terms of like what is that mix, and it's also very relevant as to where in the country you are, because certain parts of the country are just more naturally diversified in terms of their deposit mix. But I think in other parts of the country where you have commercial banks that are highly concentrated in particular areas, I think they're being much more thoughtful about how do they diversify and how do they break out into other areas. But those are some of the main topics that I'm hearing at the moment.
When you come to that idea of diversification, where might they be looking to diversify? Because that requires a change of thinking, that requires a change of perspective and mindset. It also requires looking at things through a different lens. What are you seeing on this diversification topic?
Candidly, I think that a lot of the pains that I'm hearing right now are still in its infancy. But what I'm hearing folks saying is, well, we want to diversify part of our deposit base. And then, when I try and understand, okay, cool, but how? Where are you looking to do that? How are you going to back that up in terms of what is your strategy to actually do that? I think it is still early days for a lot of folks, because to your point, if you've built up your bank where you are a specialist commercial bank within a very particular area, be that industry vertical, be that geography, that's everything is built around that. If you now want to break into a new market, so much else has to change. And so one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is how much of this is just a very current topic and a current pain. And in actual fact, as market trends shift and as everything evolves, in fact, it's going to kind of fade away in the next couple of years. And how many people are going to truly act on it right now? And I think that that'll be interesting to see. But I think what I'm hearing a lot of folks saying is, well, if we're purely commercial, how much do we want to focus on maybe SMB a little bit more to be able to grow out our SMB mix? If we concentrated amongst super high deposit, kind of like low digit in volume accounts, how do we look at trying to just get 1,000 accounts with the same amount of deposits than 10 with the same amount of deposits? And so that typically then leans itself towards, let's say, a more retail SMB sort of focus. But we're seeing interest, honestly. We're also seeing, banks that have come up with hyper specialized ideas around diversification, which for me is much more compelling.
Yes.
But when I hear that, I go, okay, that's interesting. Because what I'm hearing then is someone saying, well, our particular strengths are in this area. We have a unique advantage that would be compelling for clients to be able to come over in this space. And this is how we're trying to diversify within this very specific, vertical region area, et cetera.
Well, I'm a big believer in the idea of niche. This is something that I wrote about in Banking on Digital Growth, because that allows for an organization to build deep level knowledge, to build deep level expertise, to support and help that niche grow and flourish. But back to your point, in challenging times, kind of like we're in right now, it might feel a little bit tough. It might feel a little bit stressed. However, things repeat, cycles repeat. And so the pendulum will eventually swing the other way. But that's why, too, I think you wrote a fantastic article recently that would provide those who are watching or those who are listening. And the title, the title of the article was Strategy Before Structure. And I want to really dive into this here because it's an important topic. It's one that I'm thinking about myself, but I want to get your take. What do you mean by this strategy before structure?
Oh, man. And this is, honestly, the reason I wrote this was because this is a conversation we have in our business all the time. We are always calling each other out to say, are we making a decision about our structure before we think about our strategy? And I'll give you some examples. So it is pretty common. They will say, oh, we have a particular problem. Okay, great. Well, then we should hire and then fill in the blank of whatever the role is, right? It's like, oh, we're having a challenge, around, I don't know, we're having an issue with this particular place. Great. We should hire an engineering specialist to be able to solve that. And then everyone sits around and goes, wow, it's a great idea. Like, because if we hired that particular person, they would come with the expertise and they could certainly solve it. And then our lives would be much better. Okay, great. And then everybody gets very excited about it. And we go and build up a job description and we then go out and recruit and hire for this person. And then they come. And then a few months down the line, like the problem isn't solved. In fact, it maybe got worse. And suddenly everyone looks around and goes, wait, what happened? And when you go back and actually really understand it, and you go back to trace, back to the origin of the decision, why it came about, what you realize is that we made a decision about how we structure the organization or how we structure a solution without truly understanding our strategy first. In other words, without truly understanding what is the outcome we want to seek, why do we want to seek it there, and then we can get into how we actually get there and how we actually achieve it. And I think that so often it's a discipline and I make this mistake all the time in our team. We kind of hold each other accountable the whole time to saying, well, wait, is that structure before strategy, or are you actually sharing your strategy first? Because the hard part about solving any problem is deconstructing it into its first principles and understanding, well, wait a second, what does the outcome of success actually look like? And then more importantly, and often this is even harder, why does it matter? Like, why is it even important? Now, if you can do the hard work to get there and it feels fuzzy, it feels mushy, it feels, it's so much easier to just jump down to, here's the solution, let's get it done, let's get moving. But actually the real hard work, I think, is understanding the why and the what. And then once you've actually put in that hard work, in actual fact, the solution almost becomes easy. Like, it almost just falls into place. It becomes obvious of like what you actually need to do. And that's then the structure.
I'm going to come back to this point in just a bit and maybe even provide you with a model that might be helpful for your team, but even those that are watching and listening would be helpful for them going forward, because I think you're right. A lot of times when there's a problem, we just want to immediately jump into solving that pain without even thinking, well, why is this pain to begin? I love the perspective of first principles here. And you wrote in this article, unfortunately, too many banks and work with vendors. And they do so without first considering whether their products actually fit into the larger strategy of the bank first. Instead, they do the opposite. And they end up molding the strategy around the technology that the vendor is providing that they end up working with. We're applying this thinking in real time, because my question is, why? Why is this the case so often within this vertical?
Honestly, I think it's natural that it happens, and I totally understand why it happens. And I think that invariably, banking is a relationship game, right? And so at the end of the day, I meet a bank CEO at a conference. We end up really connecting. I really get a chance to understand, that they have a particular problem. The bank CEO gets a sense of that this is a solution that might be able to help them, because, it broadly fits within the problem solution set, right? I have a problem broadly around X. This vendor broadly solves X. Great. Let's at least have that conversation. The teams then get into a conversation and get engaging. And so typically, it's the CEO, that's the CEO's level of engagement, right? So usually that, kind of ends there. What then often happens is it goes through to the teams. The teams now have just been passed on a lead from the CEO. They take that, of course, very seriously. They look at the product, and the product itself is maybe a great product. Like, they watch the demo, and the demo looks incredible. It's exceptional. Like, the client experience is amazing. And in fact, more so, I look at a white label demo and I can see my bank in this demo doing incredible things, like fill in the blank of like whatever amazing, and there's really incredible fintech out there. There's amazing technology. So I get to see myself in an extraordinary end state. And that is very compelling anytime I get to see that, right? And so suddenly now I can look at this and go, wow, I have a very compelling value proposition which I would love to see the bank in and get as a result. And hey, getting more of X or less, reducing costs of Y or whatever it may be is very exciting for us as a bank. And it's certainly something I think will be great. And so what you then start to do is you start to then go, okay, well, what is it going to take to make this happen? Now to get this thing set up, you realize, oh, we got to make some changes over here. We got to make other changes over there. And suddenly, without even actually being aware of it, you're building and forming the bank structure, the bank strategy rather, around the fact that you're taking on this vendor. Because by the way, taking on any kind of decision, not only does it require budget, but it also requires commitment around personnel, the team, how you're going to be doing to support that, which is then, of course, in exchange for something else you could have been doing, right? And I think that, what is interesting, is, I've had the privilege of working with some banks recently who are incredibly self-aware in a tremendously refreshing and healthy way, and who are also able and comfortable being vulnerable in what they don't know and asking for help. And I had a bank reach out to me and say, Ryan, I know that we're in late stages with evaluating yourself and a few other vendors, but I had a good relationship with this person. They said, can I just get your take on how I actually make this assessment between these different vendors, one of which was us, right? And they said, but just on an objective level, like, how do you think about this? And I said, well, what are you trying to do? And they said, well, we're trying to grow deposits. I said, great. And that's a common trend in the industry, right? But how? And actually, more importantly, why? So why do you want to increase deposits, right? And then, okay, but by how much do you want to increase deposits? Okay, but what kind of deposits are important to you? So are you comfortable just getting, 10 large corporates, each depositing 100 million? Is that okay? Or are you saying that you prefer it to be a lot less? Now, they didn't necessarily have total clarity on that. But even if they did have clarity, my next question would be, does your executive team have alignment around that? Is your board aligned around that? Is this something that's been socialized in the organization, that as a bank and as a financial institution, this you have conviction in this in terms of as a need? In other words, that this is how you want to do it. Okay, great. Now, once we say, this is what they want to do, that their big focus is let's just make this up. I'm now outside of this conversation. Let's imagine they said, great, we want to grow deposits efficiently. We want to gain $1 billion in deposits over the next 12 months, and we want to do that in an efficient way. Okay, great. That's fantastic. Now, can I understand, what is your strategy to actually do that? Now, too often the answer is vendor X. But that's the problem, because vendor X is simply just structure. They're just rails that they're putting down. It's infrastructure that they're placing into the bank. They're not going to be a magnet suddenly for deposits. So the question is, well, what is your strategy? In other words, who are you going to? How are you going to be compelling for a particular market? Why would someone want to actually come and move their money over to you? Now, if your strategy is, for example, we have a thesis in the market at the moment that in the 5 neighboring towns in our area, they are, medical businesses are being underserved by local banks because they just don't understand fundamentally how to bank doctors and other medical equipment. And we think that there's an amazing opportunity here that we can leverage our own expertise in the space, as well as competitive rates that we get from XYZ partners, to be able to offer a boutique niche kind of service to be able to get in there. And we think we can capture 10% of the market, and we think that that'll help us hit our deposit goals. Okay, that sounds like a really interesting strategy. Now you can start to understand, okay, well, what do you need what's holding you back? Why wouldn't you just do it tomorrow? And maybe they say, well, to do this in an efficient way, we can't continue to just scale bankers and hire more bankers. So we need some technology to make it more efficient. Okay, great. Well, what are the biggest pieces that you need to make more efficient? Like, what's critical? Now, suddenly you're starting to get into it's strategy before structure. Once you articulate your strategy, you can start to get into what structures make sense. And then very soon, you then can define your criteria of what do you need to solve this. And then the decision around what vendor you use, it falls out, it just falls out, right? It just falls in your lap and you go, oh, okay, cool. That's great. Now that makes sense,